Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've had a fantastic day. It's getting towards the end now, so I'm the last one. So I won't try to bore you too much with PowerPoint and product bits and pieces. But yes, so my name is Lee Grogan. I'm an enterprise consultant at Optimisation. I just wonder if I could just take a quick show of hands. How many people in the audience have heard of Optimisation before? Okay, cool. Keep them up if you've ever used Optimisation as a tool for A/B testing. Cool. And keep them up if you're a current customer. Wonderful. Okay, great. I was hoping that a few of you would be here. So what I'm kind of here to talk about today is a bit about Optimisation, but really about experimentation. So for those of you that don't know Optimisation, just in a nutshell, we are the world's most adopted A/B testing platform. And we've achieved that because, in effect, we are totally focused in trying to make it easier for marketers, developers, product guys, digital e-commerce teams to just take away the complexity of making changes to the website through experimentation. And that's kind of really the essence of really what I'm trying to convey to you guys today, is really the power of experimentation. And to illustrate that, I want to take you through three short stories. So if I'm talking about experimentation, I think it's a good place to start. And an important person to mention is Marie Curie. Now, Marie Curie was born in 1867 in Poland, and at the time she was living in a world where, unfortunately, it was illegal to actually attend university for women. But she persevered, and she was a relentless experimenter. And in 1903, she was the first woman to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Prize for Science in the area of physics. Now, this photograph was taken in 1927 at the Solvay conference, and it's been referred to as the most intelligent photograph ever taken. You recognise the guy in the middle, Albert Einstein, and Marie is sat 2 seats down from her. Now, what makes Marie Curie really unique in this photograph isn't the fact that she's the only woman. It's the fact that she's the only person in that lineup to have ever won 2 Nobel Prizes for sciences in 2 different disciplines. That's physics and chemistry. And she cited the reason for her success and what really drove her was ultimately because she was fearless. She said that nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. So that's the first story I just want to share to kind of emphasize and illustrate the power of experimentation. The second one I'm going to share with you is outside of the field of science, and it's the story of, we've skipped on, good thing you're happy here. I love PowerPoint, it's one of my favorite things. Okay, well, I don't know what's happened to that slide, it's kind of disappeared. But you can see the guy in the background. Okay, so there's a guy called Dick Fosby, and he was a guy who was really passionate about track and field when he was at college, in particular the high jump. And he wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the tallest, and he certainly wasn't the strongest of his competitors, but he was a relentless experimenter. And he poured experimentation into his love of the sport. And he was the first to, in effect, develop the technique of jumping over the bar backwards. And you can imagine at the time, everybody thought he was mad, including his coaches and his fellow competitors. But he was right, because in 1968, he actually won the gold medal for the high jump at the Olympics. And he cited the reason for his victory was because he built experimentation into his training program. So that's the second example. The last one I want to share is actually the story of Google. So I know that the guys are here, or we have somebody from Google attending, so I'll be careful what I say. But in this kind of example, Google is kind of close in some ways to Optimisation in terms of the history. Google's a really irreverent company. I don't know if you've ever been to the campus over in California, but that's how they get around the campus on these bicycles. But irreverence aside, Google embed a culture of experimentation into everything they do. So if you think about, obviously, the start of it all was the search engine. Every change that was ever made to the search engine was experimented in. And today, as we know, Google is the second biggest company in the world, arguably one of the most powerful. And that kind of can give you a bit of a sense of the power of experimentation in terms of driving the success of that business. But to take the story a little bit further, in 2007, if this will move on, and to make it a little bit topical, Barack Obama came to the campus to talk about his desire to take experimentation and what Google were doing around data-driven decisioning and bring that into big government. So to start to try to learn about the data so it could actually influence the decisions that were being made by the senators, by the politicians, to improve how the country performed and was accountable. And this inspired a lot of people in the audience, and in particular, Dan Soroka, who was a product manager at Google at the time, but latterly became our founder and CEO. Inspired him so much that he quit his job 2 weeks later, and he went to join the Obama campaign as a volunteer. Now, when Dan got there, he was given a pretty broad task. He became the director of analytics and was kind of given the task of focusing on unconventional thinking. So taking this core understanding of looking at how we can challenge what we think and actually make decisions that are going to be based on data and try to adapt and interpret based on these kind of techniques of experimentation. But doing it in a way that would actually support the goal for the campaign, which was to drive more support and to garner more investment to keep the campaign going. So his kind of first task was to look at how they were actually capturing support online at the time. So this is the splash page that he was kind of faced with. Very, very standard. So lots of campaign candidates were using very similar formats. You had the focus on the kind of hero image, and the call to action was just a simple sign-up button for the email. So kind of looking at how they could experiment and applying these thoughts around unconditional thinking and experimenting in different variations, they came up with lots of different versions. But the winning version, this one on the right-hand side, had quite a big impact. In terms of the format, it's very, very similar, but the subtle changes in terms of moving from just a solo character focus to obviously more family and building that picture about the broader implications of him as a family man, taking away the colour, nice and simple, black and white, and then just having the call to action in the same place. Simplistic, but phenomenal response in terms of the change. They witnessed a 40% uplift in the number of email subscriptions that were applied to that directly related to an increase of $60 million to support that campaign. That then helped to keep that campaign into the next year, and over the next couple of months, obviously, the rest of what happened during that particular campaign kind of goes down in history, but a lot of those things that were then able to happen because of that experimentation were then kind of turned into, obviously, the additional funding to drive it forward. And this is the team that were working on that. So they're listening to, I think it was one of the many debates that were going on, and there's obviously a lot of them today, so I don't know if anybody tuned in this morning for the American one. Crazy. Anyway, if you want to know where Dan is there. So he was the only one not actually looking at the screen because he's currently working on, in that photograph, he was working on version 1 of Optimisation. He didn't even know he was doing it, but that's the code that he was writing. So this is it. So the impact of that, the campaign chief actually noted at the end, when they were trying to summarise and work out exactly how they'd achieved a lot of what they'd done, he stated that throughout the campaign, whenever we took a risk, we were rewarded. It was good internal motivation to be able to attempt really difficult, unconventional things. And that kind of really saw out this whole kind of power of experimentation, and was, in terms of Optimisation, was really the kind of genesis moment. So after that successful campaign and all the great things that followed, Dan immediately went away and basically set up Optimisation with the co-founder Pete Noonan, and that's kind of like the backstory to where we are today. Looking at where the platform is, when I say it's the most adopted platform, when we consider where it sits in the market space, it is by quite a far margin in terms of the number of sites that are running the technology today. But it's not, behind each one of those sites is a brand, okay? And we have over 15,000 customers globally. Myself and my team in the UK have the privilege of working with a lot of brands that you will recognise, but they're largely small. The ultimate idea really was to kind of democratise testing, to make it available to everybody, whether the business was large or small, but to basically give them the ability to do those things that weren't normally just the mainstay of the larger organisation. So we've got a very broad breadth. And one of the things that I often find, kind of like when I'm trying to get a sense of where our customers are today, is that, and I think this has kind of come out in a few of the talks, I think Manny mentioned it, that your jobs are getting harder, right? So the situation has obviously changed in terms of how people are interacting with your brands, how people are interacting with your websites, how you are, in effect, communicating with your customers on a day-to-day basis. And we kind of think about that and be like, well, what's kind of driving that overwhelming need to keep up? And why are things getting so tough? And, we all agree that everything kind of has been focused today on customer experience in one level or another, but, it's a given today that if we don't deliver a good experience, we're just not going to keep that customer, we're not going to retain them, or we're not going to win them, especially in a competitive environment. We will accept that. And it's something that we constantly need to keep an eye on and iterate change to make sure that we're delivering that at a consistent time. Of course, all the evidence is there. There's lots of reports, there's lots of industry analytics, Gartner and what have you, who are supporting that and giving us this sense that we are in a new kind of battleground. It's not ultimately down to price and availability. It is going to be the differentiation between you and your similar brand competitor that is offering similar items, so you can be judged on that experience. So all of these things are kind of building up. The other thing that's a concern is the pace with which innovation is accelerating in terms of adoption. So this slide really is kind of giving us a sense of how things have kind of like accelerated over time. So if you imagine like 1900, so this is the release of the telephone. So that took 80 years to be adopted. In the 20s we had the radios, so that took 40 years. In the mid-40s we had TV, so that took 20 years. Then we had the internet in the 80s, so that took 10 years. I think you can get a sense of what the trend here is. That for every new innovation that comes on stream, the adoption curve is actually half of what it was for the previous innovation. And now we have the likes of smartphones, social media, virtual reality, Alex and so on, and the Internet of Things. This just adds to the weight with which all of these things you've got to start to think about. All of these considerations in terms of, do we actually need to engage on these new platforms and these new technologies, and how are we going to meet that demand when our customers want to do that, which is invariably what's going to lead us that way. So it's getting more complicated to deliver these experiences. It's not just about the desktop anymore. It's not just about mobile devices anymore. It's about a variety of new technologies that people can actually begin to interact with, like smart televisions. The adoption of that has been quite stark over the last few years in terms of apps now running on TVs that people can start to interact with. Games consoles, Apple TV, Android, smartwatches, Fitbits, Apple Watch, all the rest of it. Anything that you can see now with an internet connection. New innovations like Amazon Echo, unless you've got a BT hub. But Amazon Echo, the speed with which this has been adopting is quite shocking. If you think about it as a marketer, you can now have a conversation with your customer in the living room. And that's scary, but also really cool. And of course, virtual reality is beginning to bear fruit. We all hoped it would. So giving us all of these different dimensions that we can start to consider. But these are all things that, oh my God, it's overload time. And that's really where Optimisation began to really think over the last couple of years about how this journey, which is, in fact, so different from what it was. Your customers today have a multi-device path to purchase. Again, we talked about it quite a bit today. And it's super important to start thinking about how these things weave their way through these devices, whether they're doing it now or not, but ultimately there will be some elements of this to consider in terms of how you're looking to expand market share, grow the business, and retain that engagement with your customers. And this is a huge challenge, right? It's super complicated in terms of the technologies and the understanding of what might be needed to be able to address this. And that's kind of what's led Optimisely to release in the last couple of weeks our new platform, which is, this isn't really a sales pitch bit, but I will say. So we've announced Optimisely X, which in effect means that we are now bringing a platform to market that would enable businesses to be able to engage everywhere, but to develop an experimentation or to experiment with their ideas across their entire digital landscape. Now, what does that really mean? So, if you think about today, a lot of the technologies are very client, like browser-based in terms of MBT and A/B testing, personalization, recommendation engines, kind of all feeding in that kind of front end. We sit in there as well, of course, as a vendor. The other decision for companies is to say, well, actually, we want to do it ourselves. So we can actually build in-house our own testing platform. We might build an algorithm for our search. We might even define our own recommendations engine. But there's a decision behind that, because it's like, well, we want to own that. We believe that we can do it, so why buy something off the shelf? And both have certain attributes, but they also bring on these different challenges in terms of these new devices coming on the street and keeping up with the pace and the acceleration of innovation as we see it today. And this is really where Optimisely believe that the X platform bridges that gap, that enables the business to be able to say, look, we can support both initiatives, we can actually begin to experiment on them, and we can truly understand what it is in terms of the impact of the investment, the risk, and the support that it will give to our objectives as a business going forward. So we've kind of broken down into 4 slices, and I'll be very, very brief with this because I'm conscious of time, but the idea being that from a single platform, you're able to experiment across the web. So this is testing, this is multivariate A/B, this is personalization, whatever change you want to make to the web experience, but through a single platform. I'll come back to that one. Full stack. This is, if you think about server side, so basically taking it away from the browser and running it on a server, so you're improving performance and removing a lot of the traditional concerns about browser technologies, overloading containers and what have you, but driving that side, so being able to kind of deliver those kind of experiments via a full stack solution. Mobile, of course, across all of the OSs and all the native mobile platforms. And then this acronym, OTT, which is pretty new, another Americanism that's kind of come through, but is a really important space in terms of these desktop devices. So over the top is, in effect, what, if you're not familiar with it, but this is the smart TVs, this is the Apple TV, this is, you know, your Google Chrome, plugins, etc. But providing a massive amount of growth in travel, in retail, financial services are looking at this. We're seeing a phenomenal kind of opportunity that's coming out. But by building it into a platform whereby you can actually experiment on all of these aspects via a single point, it's kind of what's drove us to where we are. So if you then think about that as devices, our motivation is to enable the marketer, the IT director, the CTO, whomever they are, to actually think about all of the digital pulses that their business has, whether that's customer facing, whether that's internal, whether that's supply chain, whether that's, you know, whatever aspect of the business where they're relying on technology that has software that is connected to the internet. The idea is that you should be able to experiment and leverage the power of experimentation to ensure that those investments are working the way they should be, and then to iterate and improve over time. So I won't go into the kind of detail around it. Each of these areas have different things within the new platform that can be applied, like personalization and so on. I'd be happy to share that offline. But if I just wanted to leave you guys with one thing in terms of just a kind of an idea to take away from this session, is to be brave and experiment and think about really kind of how you are engaging and using technologies. And it's not just Optimisely, there's plenty of testing tools out there at the ground level, but to kind of have a little bit more confidence in your team and be brave and experiment. That's it. Thank you.